do solving by square roots, you can type in solving by square roots and it'll bring up videos for it. And you'll get just like 5-10 minute video examples of how to go about doing it. So that is kind of awesome. Right. So the last time I saw you, we were talking, we did a factoring refresher and we were trying to find the factors of quadratics. Correct? Today, we're just taking it one step further. You are still going to be finding the factors, but then you're going to set those factors equal to 0 and solve. That's literally the only difference between what we were doing and what we are doing. So if I had a problem like 10x squared equals 6x, and I asked you to factor it, well, the first thing we would do is we would move that 6x over so that we had everything on the other side, right? So I would have minus 6x on both sides. I would wind up with 10x squared minus 6x equals 0. And I know that the equals is something different than what we did last time, but I'm going to kind of give you the lesson as I go over what we were doing before. Because now we're getting it in forms of not just an expression, but an equation. We have it set equal to something, so we are going to try and solve these quadratics. If I was factoring this, it's not a trinomial, but each piece has an x, right? And I'm going to look at this and I could go also each piece is divisible by 2, right? If we remember before we had to pull out that greatest common factor first. Well, my greatest common factor of 10 and 6 is 2, right? Each of them have an x, so I can pull out an x. And when I do this, 10 divided by 2 is 5. X squared divided by x is just x. Minus 6, well, 6 divided by 2 is 3. And x divided by x is 1. So we're done there. We've got this equals 0. These are our factors. This is what we were doing before. But today we're not just talking about factoring. We're talking about solving quadratics. I'm just going to put quads by factoring. Now, in math, we have something that you know about. You innately know it. You've known it since elementary school. You just didn't know what it was called. What it is called is the zero product property. And the zero product property says that anytime I multiply something times 0, what do I get? Exactly, right? Anytime I multiply something by 0, I get 0. Whether I'm multiplying x times 0 or 8 million times 0, the minute I multiply times 0, I get 0 as an outcome. And if you look at this right here, we are saying that this 2x, right here, that looks like a W or a butt. I'm not sure. We're saying that this 2x right here is being multiplied by whatever this quantity is, right? So if this right here equals 0, the whole thing equals 0, right? Because I'm multiplying it. If whatever is in here equals 0, the entire thing is equal to 0. And we want to know, well, what makes this equal to 0? So once we find our factors, once we get to our factors and they're set equal to 0, all we have to do is take each factor and set it equal to 0 and then solve for the variable. So if 2x equals 0, well, we've got that one. Then we've got 5x minus 3 equals 0. And we just have to figure out what we make x so that the whole thing equals 0, right? And we do that by getting the x by itself. Here I have 2 times x equals 0. I'm just going to divide both sides by 2, and I get x equals 0. Which makes sense because we're saying 2 times x. Well, what times 2 equals 0 besides 0? Here, I'm going to undo everything being done to this x until I get x by itself. I'm going to add 3 to both sides, and then I have 5x equals 3. And then I'm going to divide by 5 because I've got that 5 being multiplied to the x. And I get x equals 3/5. These are our solutions, right? And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. If you remember before when we were doing solving quadratics by graphing, what we talked about is when we had the graph of a quadratic, the solutions were wherever the graph crossed the x-axis, right? So right here, whatever that point is, and right here, whatever that point is, are my solutions, right? Those are the solutions to whatever quadratic formula, whatever quadratic equation makes this U shape, right? This specific U shape, right? Its solutions are these points on the x-axis. What is y when I have any point on the x-axis? If you think about what y actually is, we're saying it's a distance from the x-axis, right? If my hand is the x-axis, y values are a distance from there, right? Well, what if I have a point right on the x-axis? What is my y value? Think about this. What are the points here? Say this is -3 and this is 2, right? If I was going to write this as a point, my x we know is -3. What's my y? Exactly 0, right? It's right on that line. We haven't gone a distance. Here, my x is 2. What's my y? Also 0. Thank you, Daryl. I appreciate that. So it makes sense that if I have this equation set equal to 0, right? That means my y is equal to 0. I just need to find out what I can do to these pieces, right? That will make them equal 0 to find the solutions, right? What makes 2x equal to 0? Well, if x is 0. What makes 5x minus 3 equal to 0? Well, if x equals 3/5, it's 0. What I'm doing here is I am teaching this lesson off the even numbered problems on the worksheet that I assigned for you guys, and then you just have to do the odd numbered problems, which is why you only have 5 problems. That's all I'm giving you. So if I have, for example, 16x squared equals 81, I'm going to set this equal to 0. The first thing we want to do, set problem equal to 0. Right? Then the next thing you want to do is factor. Find your factors. So let's do that. 16 and 81, they don't have a ton in common. But first, let's subtract 81 from both sides so that we're set equal to 0. So now I have 16x squared minus 81 equals 0. Now, we haven't done solving by square roots yet. But we have done difference of squares, right? And if I look at this problem, this is just 4x squared minus 9 squared, right, equals 0. Correct? Which means that I could write the factors of this as 4x plus 9 times 4x minus 9 equals 0. Are you following? Does that make sense to you? Remember when we did difference of squares? Perfect square minus a perfect square. So if I set 4x plus 9 equal to 0 and 4x minus 9 equal to 0, I will find my solutions by isolating the x. So here I'm going to subtract 9 from both sides, and I get 4x equals negative 9. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 4, and I get x equals negative 9/4. I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to add 9 to both sides, and I get 4x equals 9. Then I'm going to take that 4 and divide it, and I get x equals positive 9/4. These are both solutions. One is negative 9/4. One is positive 9/4. And that's how we handle a perfect square. Is this making some sense? Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate makes me feel like I'm not talking to myself, so I appreciate that. Let's look at if I have x squared minus 4x equals 77. So the first thing that we need to do is move this 77 over, right? We have to have this set equal to 0. We're just going to subtract 77 from both sides and reset the problem as x squared minus 4x minus 77 equals 0. And then we're going to go through the motion of finding those factors again. We are going to look at our factors of 77. One will be positive, one will be negative, right? That are going to equal 4. So I know I'm going to have x plus something, and I know I'm going to have x minus something. If you remember that chart I made for you guys, that might help with that. And we're going to figure out, well, what are these numbers, right? We've got 1 times 77, and luckily we have 7 times 11. And we know that the bigger one is our negative, right? Because this term right here is negative. Those are my only factors of 77, and luckily they work, right? Negative 11 plus 7 is negative 4. And all we have to do is put the 11 in here and the 4 in here. And then we can go ahead and find our solutions, right? We can set x plus 4 equal to 0. And we can set x minus 11 equal to 0. And here we just subtract 4. We get x equals negative 4. And then here we can add 11 to both sides. Has to be both sides, right? So we can maintain the equality. Equals 11. And these are our two solutions. This whiteboard also doesn't make my boxes pretty for me. Like I can make them sloppy, and the old one would just straighten them all out for me. And all our problems are mostly going to work out this way, right? Sometimes you might have to do a little bit more work to get everything set equal to 0. Sometimes you're not going to have an a term equal to 1, right? You might have a number other than 1 in front of, I was trying to use the paper right in here, right? You might have something like a 4 or a 3 or a 5, and you'll have to do something a little different, right? You'll have to do a little more work to get to it. And we'll do one of each of those before I let you go. If I have x squared plus 8x minus 65 equals x minus 5, to get this set equal to 0, we just have to do a little bit more work, right? We have to add 5 to both sides, which would give us x squared plus 8. Sorry, this is supposed to be 8x. 8x minus 60 equals x. But we still have this x here, so we're going to have to subtract that out as well. I always like to line it up with whatever I'm subtracting it from. So I have x squared plus 7x minus 60 equals 0. And so now I'm set equal to 0. Now I just need to find my factors of 60. I know 1 is going to be x plus something times x minus something. And the reason I know that is because I have a negative right here. And I know that my bigger factor will be positive because that 7x is positive. My factors of 60 are 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and something, 1, 12. Remember, my bigger ones are positive, so my littler ones are negative. And we're trying to find the ones that equal 7, which is why I stopped at 5 and 12, right? Because 12 minus 5 equals 7. And so here where my positive is, I'm going to put 12. And here where my negative is, I'm going to put 5. Right? The factoring part should all be review. Now I'm going to set them each equal to 0 so I can find the solutions. So here I have x plus 12 equals 0, so I'm just going to subtract 12 from both sides. And I get x equals negative 12. Here I have x minus 5 equals 0, so I'm going to add. I'm going to do the opposite of subtraction, which is addition. And I'm going to add 5 to both sides. And I get x equals 5. Man, see, I hate this thing. Can't even read my numbers anymore. So nothing's too bad, right? We've just taken it one little step further from what we were doing before. If you remember how to do the factoring, you'll know how to do this, because after that, it's just taking those factors and setting them equal to 0. I'm doing one more just so I make sure that you have an example of every kind of problem that you can possibly come across. There we go. Trying to move the screen along. So this is my last example, which means this is the last problem of the day, which makes it the best problem of the day. So if I have, let's go 5x squared plus 11x plus 2 equals 0. Don't have much work to do to set it equal to 0. Why? Because it's already set equal to 0. Right? So now all we have to do is factor, but before we didn't have anything in front of that x squared, and this time we do. This is one of those problems where I had you multiply the 5 times the 2, the x squared term times the 2, and rewrite the problem as x squared plus 11x plus 10, right? And we've still got that equals 0, but we don't really need to play with it yet. We're just going to find our factors of 10 that equal 11, which is super easy when we're talking about 10, right? If I have my factors of 10, I have 1 and 10, and I have 2 and 5. And the two that add up to 11 are 1 plus 10. Everything is positive with this because everything is positive in the equation. So I'm going to have x plus 1 times x plus 10, right? And I'm going to have that set equal to 0. But before, remember, we multiplied by 2, so we have to divide that 2 out, right? So here I have 2, and here I have 2, and I'm just going to rewrite this. If it divided evenly, 1 divided by 2 doesn't divide evenly, so I'm going to put the 2 in front of the x, and I'm going to have 2x plus 1. 10 divided by 2 is just 5, so then I have x plus 5 equals 0. And now I can just set those two factors equal to 0 and solve. So I have 2x plus 1 equals 0, and I have x plus 5 equals 0. And we're just going to start undoing everything being done to x. We're going to subtract 1, and we get 2x equals negative 1. We're going to divide by 2, and we get x equals negative 1/2. Here we're just going to subtract 5 from both sides. And we are going to get x equals negative 5. And bam, we found our solutions. So that is all there is to it. This right here is your worksheet today, right? I posted it in Power School. I just did all the all the even problems. You guys just have to do the 5 odd problems. Every problem that I just did for you is like the problem that's next to it, right? Same method is used for each problem on each side. So I did number 2. It is a lot like number 1. I did number 4. It is just like number 3. They solve the same way. So if you go through your notes or you're going through the video when you go to do your homework, you should be able to see the similar problem worked out. So that is all I have for you. Let me restate this. Show your work. If you turn in a worksheet to me and all it has on it is answers, all I can give you is a 0. If I just wanted answers, I would have put the assignment in Delta Math. I am having you guys do worksheets specifically so I can see the work. Because when it comes time to take the test for this unit, I'm going to ask you questions that are going to say, solve this by factoring, or solve this by completing the square, or solve this using the quadratic formula, right? And you have to be able to show me the work. It's why I'm giving you worksheets. Otherwise, I would just put it all in Delta Math and let you cheat away, right? Or not cheat or whatever, but I need to see that you actually know how to do it. That's it. You just have to solve out the 5 questions, Maria, and then submit them in Power School under that assignment in the assignment tab. And that's it. I wanted to keep it nice and short for you guys because I know it's Thanksgiving break coming up and you guys want to spend time with your family or your friends or just chilling on the couch. And I want you to be able to do all of those things.